comments in the chat. We still have about a minute before we officially start. All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Good evening again. Hopefully everyone is doing well and welcome to week 5. So we will take our quiz tonight and then we'll go over the rest, all of our content for our exam 2, which is next week. All right, here. So go ahead and place your name and campus in the chat. Just as a reminder, these sessions are recorded and they are viewed by the attendance administrator. Ensure that your name appears on the screen as it appears on Fortis's roster. You would need to just click the little dots to list this and then change your name. Make sure that it shows, it matches up. In the event that you are not in front of the camera, please place a message in the chat just to myself. Don't send it out to everyone. In the event that you have to leave from in front of the camera for any reason. All right, let's just go over some other housekeeping things here. So after that first exam, you all, the time goes by to me really, really fast. So make sure again that you are looking at your schedule, work, play, school, clinicals, all of the things that you have to do. Just be looking at your schedule. So revise what you need to, delete, pause, and make those changes as you need to, because we're almost halfway through the term. Let me just share my screen here so we can look at the little modules here. Okay, so we're in week 5. Of course, we'll take our quiz tonight. Then next week, we take exam 2. The professional development plan is due also in week 6. Make sure that you're responding to your 2 peers, as it's been directed from week 1. Your initial post should be on that Wednesday. And make sure that you're responding to your 2 peers. I think that's 20 points or 10 points. No, it's 10 points. So make sure that you're reading through. And as you read through, remember, each time we continue to read the same thing or something in variations, it will enforce and give us that strong foundation about the content. So be sure to read through. Then you have your position papers. That's week 8. And for your NCLEX, be sure to upload your PDF. Once you finish your NCLEX questions, turn in the highest score. And then download the PDF. So when you go to the assignment section, you can upload your PDF. If it requires 25 questions, complete the 25 questions. If you want to do additional questions, don't do that as part of that assignment, because you still will only get credit for those 25 that the assignment actually is required. Now, those assignments, and this is for any of your classes, if you're writing papers and you have had the same assignment, if you repeated a class, if the assignment is similar to another assignment in another class. And so what you want to do is make sure that you go back through your paper, make sure that you're paraphrasing, cite inside of the paper, and then also make that reference on the reference page. Because if you've written the same paper, complete the same assignment or a similar assignment for various classes, it's going to appear that you are plagiarizing. So ensure that you go back and paraphrase, do your insight references, and then make sure you list it on your reference page. Because if not, that's going to be a whole thing. Remember from week 1, we talked about plagiarism. So that goes on your record, and there are disciplinary actions behind it. So just make sure that you go back and paraphrase inside of your paper. Make sure that you're citing the references. appropriately and then listed on the reference page. And that's for any class that you are repeating a class, repeating that assignment, or you have similar assignments. Because there are some classes, the topics are almost kind of the same. So just make sure that it does not look like you're plagiarizing. So just go back and paraphrase. All right. And then let's see here. Around week 8, you should start receiving your HESI information. So go ahead and start going back, all the way back one, classroom recordings, those live exam reviews. Because remember, the HESI is everything. You're getting for all of those topics, all of your required readings, so that you can go back and just start reviewing that information and making that foundation strong. And then learn the concept, but also be able to apply it. Think about what's an example of what that concept is. What's an example of that concept? And then in week 10 is again like week 4, you all. There are several classes that have an exam in week 10. So be thinking about what that week is going to look like for you. You need to put some things on pause. You need that exam proctor on campus. Remember that 72-hour prior notice. If you do need that exam proctor on campus, because we have to find someone that's available, a place, so that the exam can be taken in a quiet place for you. So just be thinking about week 10. 10 is again like week 4 was. And also remember week 11. HESI. Usually HESIs are not given during this time of day. So that's going to look different for your schedule. For those of you that have work, other obligations, just go ahead and be thinking about what you need to rearrange for that week. Because it's going to be, but you will start receiving notifications for sure no later than week 9 about those exam dates and times. And sometimes it's not even, the exams are not on the day that you routinely have classes. Remember, this class is offered more than on just Mondays. So be thinking about that. I know you said that's a way off, but that time just goes by really fast. So any questions about those little things that I've talked about thus far? All right. So just be thinking about that. Okay, let's look at this here. Slideshow. All right, so let's look at some of our content here. So the Nurse Practice Act. In the chat, go ahead and place at least one thing. If you were trying to tell someone about, I'm trying to share my screen here, about the Nurse Practice Act, how would you sum it all up? We know it, the content, there are several pieces and parts of it, but if you had to just sum it all up in one line or one sentence or two, what would you say? We'll give you a minute and a half to respond in the chat. What would you say about that Nurse Practice Act? Again, taking what we know and then applying it from the beginning. So what would be that one-liner or that two-liner that you would put in, or that you would tell someone that tells us all about the Nurse Practice Act? Okay. Sets the standards, and I'm just looking at your responses here. We'll give you time. Protects the public. How does it protect the public? It really does. How does it do that? By giving us standards, outlining the education, giving us nursing license requirements, defining that scope. Good. So take the time to read the other responses. Okay. So yes, if you're having issues, connectivity issues, or if one of your classmates is contacting you, please put it in the chat so that therefore we have a record of it, because this connectivity, you all, we just don't ever know sometimes. So thank you for that update. It also protects the nurses. Got it. Yes. Okay. So take a look at what others are saying. Establish that licensing requirement. Okay. All right. So it is guided by the state statutes. It is the law. So if you work in Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia, New York City, the nurse practice acts for each state are going to be, specific to that state. And whatever that nurse practice act says, it is considered the law. It is a guideline. It tells us what we can do lawfully, what we can legally do. It is those tasks that we can legally do. So if someone calls 1-800 lawyer and they say, well, the nurse administer me medication, some Tylenol. Well, they're going to go back to our nurse practice act. Well, can this nurse administer medication? They called 1-800 lawyer and they said, well, this unlicensed personnel administered me Tylenol in the hospital setting or the long-term care facility. They're going to go back to that governing document, that governing act, those things that tells us what we can legally do. And an unlicensed personnel should not be administering medication. So that's how we take what we know and then apply it to a situation. And then it functions as the State Board of Nursing's general provisions. Okay. So, and then to sum it all up, you all gave some good examples. It is the information about those minimal competencies required for us as an LPN. It's that information about the minimum competencies, those things that we can lawfully do, that we can legally undertake. So ethics is a system of standards or moral principles that direct our actions. Is this right or is this wrong? Ethics is concerned with the way people either individually or as a group decide to do something or not do something. What actions are we going to take? If one has the right to do something, if one has the duty to do something. So I've mentioned, different settings. The Nurse Practice Act can say, hey, yes, we can legally participate with this task or complete this task, but professionally, we might not want to. And so that's for when you do your interviews and you're looking at your job descriptions and the tasks that you'll have to complete. You want to look at that, because the things that you will have a duty to complete, you might not want to, because it ethically, personally, you might not want to participate or complete those tasks, because for whatever reason, personally, you may think it's the wrong thing to do. So you want to ask those questions, because that might not be a facility that you want to work at, and or is at a minimum is a conversation you want to have. So in the event that task is a duty of yours, then what's going to be the plan? Or will that task be assigned to someone else? Are you going to switch out, or what? What would that look like? Non-malfeasance, not causing any harm to the patient. We want to, at a minimum, we want to think about safety. We make sure those beds are in the lowest positions, that those call lights are in reach, that the remote control things that those clients need are easily accessible, not causing any harm, making sure that call light is in reach and that bed's in the lowest position. So in the event, hopefully they don't fall out of bed, but sometimes they do. If they do, if it's lower, it lessens the chance of injury, rather from a higher height. If a person falls, there's a difference in the impact if that bed is low, if that bed is in the lowest position. That's non-malfeasance, not causing any harm to the patient. So autonomy, auto, self, state of being self-governing. So that patient has a right to make whatever decisions. We want to make sure that they have enough information, and we support them in that. If a client decides not to take some medication or treatment, it is okay. We complete whatever documentation and we support them in that. Even if they're deciding to leave a facility against medical advice, we make sure that they have all the information that they need so they can make an informed decision. But it goes back to they have the right to self-govern, the right to make that decision. And we're going to talk about what principle goes against or is the opposite of autonomy that we talked about is used in extreme circumstances, emergency situations. Which principle was that?
Is it the beneficent?
Beneficent paternalism. I'll go fast forward to that one. And so when you're looking at concepts and things to see if there's anything that like that's the opposite of each other. So beneficent paternalism, a parent or guardian has made a decision about treatment or medications for their child or their loved one. And so we have the healthcare provider. They come in and they essentially it's them saying, hey, the option that you have chose, I don't think is the best. So I think I need to petition the courts and present this information. It does not mean that the courts will side or go with the healthcare professional, but beneficent paternalism is a disrespectful attitude toward the client and what the client has decided to do. It's a I know what's best for you attitude, which is the opposite of autonomy. We don't try to prevent them from leaving. We don't try to prevent them from, for example, if they're refusing their medication, we make sure, client, we just do documentation. The client has been informed, they're refusing it. But beneficent paternalism, it tells the client that I know what's best option. It's them trying to choose for the client or their family members. But it's only used in emergency situations or extreme situations. And like I just said, the courts, they might not go with the healthcare provider, but it's just another opportunity to present information to an independent person. Okay. So justice is the quality of being fair and reasonable. So we're providing the same best care for each of our patients, no matter their background, their ability to pay. For example, if they're non-compliant diabetic or they're alcoholic, or if, they tend to run out of medications and they come in, to the emergency room on the same day each month, we still provide that same care to our patients. Fidelity. This is the acting with integrity and trustworthiness. And it's us. I think someone mentioned earlier something about the coworker, but yes, this is what this is, where they are, for example, we overhear or we witness something that is not providing best care for our clients. And so, we report that, we intervene, speaking up, but then we do want to be respectful just to make sure, that we're gathering all the facts. Because sometimes things that we see might not be what we see, especially if we haven't seen it from the beginning to the end, but still, it's us intervening to ensure that that client is getting that best care provided for them. Okay, we talked about beneficent paternalism. So beneficent, what benefit? What are we doing? Is what we're doing our actions benefiting this client? Okay, we noticed that the client, after we administer this medication, the blood pressure is still elevated. The temperature isn't being controlled. Or we notice after we give the pain medication, this client cannot perform, cannot wake up, they're drowsy. Or on the opposite, we administer the pain medication and the client's pain isn't controlled. Well, some people's pain isn't ever all the way controlled, but it's they're as pain-free as possible. So we're administering this medication. This patient's still screaming, hollering, they can't get at ease. And so we make that phone call. We report that. The medication that we're administering the client is zonked out for hours and hours. And also the medication where this client doesn't seem like they're getting any relief from pain or the temperature's not breaking. So we can call and question those orders. We give our information, our assessment findings, and hopefully they will provide a different intervention. So malpractice. A healthcare provider causing harm or injury or death to a patient. So the nurse is failing to provide the appropriate treatment or action. So the care plan, the example here, the care plan says, hey, we need to have two people to assist this client with transfers. The two people went in, one person got a phone call. You go ahead, I'll be back. The client ends up with the injury. We have just committed malpractice. We have not provided what the care plan has said is required to take care of that patient. Even if the care plan says, hey, one person assist or walk along with the patient or accompany the patient to activity. We start out. Someone calls us in the room to help them. We tell the patient to go on. The patient sustains an injury. That is an example of malpractice. We have not provided the care that is required to take care of that client. And those care plans, they got us, is our little roadmap, and they're individualized. So when the companies buy these products, everything for that concept is there. For example, for diabetes or hypertension, all the options are there. But we go in and take out or remove the things that do not apply for our patient because we provide that individualized care. So there's some things that are reportable. We must report a gunshot injury. Even if this person, we know them well, we know that they have taken firearm safety classes, it was a mistake, we still have to report it. Any adverse effects, we usually ask clients and patients to remain, especially after we give medications, in the doctor's office, the urgent care center, even if we're administering in the hospital or the nursing home, and we notice an adverse effect or some type of reaction, hives, this person breaks out or complains of, hopefully they don't, or anaphylactic shock, but some type of reaction, adverse effect, we must report that. And then any suicidal ideations, a person saying that, they want to commit suicide and they have a plan, we must report these. We must report that. All right. Any questions about what we just covered? See? So just as a reminder, you all make sure that you are going back and looking at the classroom recordings, that's in addition to the exam recordings, and your required readings. So you don't have to show your hand, but who went back and watched the video, the recording from week 4 prior to tonight? We reviewed all the content that was on the quiz. So, we go over the content. We don't give you questions and answers, but the content, we do go over it. Make sure that you're going back through the classroom recordings, ensuring that you can apply the different concepts. So, example of knowing what autonomy is, but then what does that look like in a real life scenario? So make sure that you're going back through the classroom recordings and your required readings. Another thing for quizzes, it does give partial points for those exams. Is all or nothing. So if it's select all that apply and you select 2 of the correct answers, there's a third one and you don't select it, you don't get any points. But the quizzes do give you that. So just, make sure that we do understand the concepts here. Ask questions in an email, or we can jump on Zoom if we need to review something. But at a minimum, make sure that you're actually going back through the required readings and listening to the videos, the recordings. Okay, so beneficent. We are doing something that benefits the client. So we look at each scenario and see whether or not it's benefiting the client. Okay. Do we give out our personal information to our patients? They have a question, they're going home for discharge. Or can we give them the facilities number to call back and refer to? Which one is the better thing to do? Give them our phone number, the facility, exactly. When you're reading answer choices, make sure that you're selecting an answer choice that is all the way correct, the entire choice. Now, if it's partially incorrect, half of the answer is correct and the other half is not correct, then you will not select that answer choice. Okay? And so that's just a test taken tip. But beneficent, if we are calling that doctor, go back to that slide. The examples that I gave, the client pain isn't controlled. The client's temperature, they have a fever, and what we're doing is the medication that we're giving, that fever is not breaking. We're administering blood pressure medication. Blood pressure is going higher and higher. We're calling, questioning that order. We're doing what's best for that client. Because remember, we're that lifeline, so to speak. We're that phone call that's between us, especially if they're in the hospital or nursing home. We're the ones making that phone call. Now, if they're home, they can go to the doctor's office themselves. But if they're in a facility that we're working at, we are the go-between. So we question that doctor's order. They're getting pain medication. It's making them too sleepy. They can't even function. We question that order. Let's see. Justice. So someone come off mute and tell me what is justice. If you were giving us or telling us a definition, or you can give an example. What is justice?
I think justice is being fair, like treating all patients equally.
Okay. Anyone else? One other person. Justice.
Fair treatment for all patients.
Okay. So the example that I gave was providing that best care from no matter what the patient's background is. That patient is an alcoholic. That patient is a non-compliant diabetic. It seems like that patient comes in every month on the same day because they're out of medicines or supplies. We still provide that same best care for that client. Just as we're providing that equal care. Being fair and reasonable to the client. Would we want to place a patient in the room that's farthest from us, from the nurses station, if they the client's getting on our nerve, they keep ringing that bell, they're loud, they're obnoxious. They are, do we want to put them in the room that's farthest from us, from the nurses station? Is that something we want to do?
No.
No, ma'am.
Okay. Because that client is going to be at higher risk for falling, because more than likely they probably are disoriented, have some confusion going on, and they're going to be at higher risk for fall and injury and other things happening to them that are adversely, that's not recommended. So putting them further away, we need to find out what's the root cause. Why are they being loud? What is going on? Can we continue to provide that reality orientation? Do we need this person needs to be one-on-one, but moving that patient away from the nurses station because they're worrisome, that is not providing that best care for each client. So one of the answer choice was something about a person providing instructions for someone, then someone else, and remember HIPAA. So think about if the scenario, the answer choices they're giving you, if the connections doesn't make, they're not connecting, don't select it. So some of you all selected the one about the dressing change. And then it was a woman, then it was a man. So it didn't say that that was a child and their parent or guardian. It didn't say that the patient gave permission. So remember all of those principles and, in providing that best care. Those medication administration rights, HIPAA. Okay, let's see. Nurse Practice Act. Tell me what does it mean? What is it? The Nurse Practice Act. What is it? It guides the nursing practice of every nurse. What is tell me a true statement about the Nurse Practice Act.
This tells us the scope of practice.
Mm-hmm.
It's the state law.
Yeah, it's a law, standards and guidelines.
Mm-hmm. So if I am in New York, do my license cover, and it's not a compact license, and even with the compact, it's not all states, it's not every state. So, but the principle is if I'm in one state and I'm licensed for that state, can I just go to every state and practice because I'm licensed in one state? Is it one for all?
No, yeah, it's one
No.
for, no, you can't go to a different state.
No, you can't. Even if you have the compact, it's only those that are in that compact. You still can't just take your license from Ohio and go to Mississippi and say, "Hey, I have this nursing license from Ohio. I can come here and practice." No, it's governed by each nurse's practice state act. Each state has its own, and you have to, and you're governed by each one. So when you cross those state lines, one state might allow you to perform CT scans. You cross the state lines, you can't perform CT scans. It just depends on what that Nurse State Practice Act allows you to do. So again, make sure when you're reading the answer choices that it is all the way true. Okay, and I'm looking just to make sure, but I think those are the ones that you missed. No one missed math, I don't think. Looks like you I did no, did one more. Okay. So here it is. We have so what are some things that are reportable or that we have to reveal or tell? What are some examples? I heard somebody
Gunshot,
say gunshot. Go ahead.
gunshot injury,
Mm-hmm.
Suicidal thoughts.
any
Mhm.
adverse
Suicidal
effects,
ideation.
Okay.
adverse effects.
So what's an example? This is example of when I say know the concept, but then be able to apply it. You all did say gunshot injury. And like we said, even if we know that that person um you know, they've had guns forever and ever. They went through they teach the firearm safety classes, but there's an injury, you still have to report it. You also said a person having wanted to commit suicide and have a plan. Then you said adverse reactions or effects. What does that mean? Give me an example of that.
Like hives,
Okay.
a
Hives,
rash.
rash,
Anaphylactic shock, maybe.
anaphylactic shock. Yes, all of those are things. So that's an example of knowing that these are things that are reportable or revealable. We have to tell someone. That is true. Adverse effects. Well, what are those? These are effects that a person might have that's not intended for them taking the medication. We give medication, we give a vaccine, or we give Toradol, a pain shot, as they say, a steroid shot. We're giving it to decrease the inflammation, or we're giving was it Lasix to get rid of some fluid, but then they can't hardly breathe. That's an adverse effect. That medication was not given to make that person have hard time breathing or to have a rash. So that's what I mean. Know the concepts, the concept, but be able to apply it. All right. So overall, everyone did pretty good. But again, make sure you're reviewing your classroom recordings, asking questions about the concepts that you have, and do your required readings. All right, so let's look at that information once again, because the HESI is in this next exam is heavy on these principles. So let's do a Kahoot. Let's mix it up a little bit here. I think there's only We might have time before we go on our break to, let's just go ahead. Okay, I am going to try not to say anything. I'm just let y'all answer the questions. I'm going to go on to the next. So for Kahoot, I know you want to answer the question the fastest. Read it. Make sure you're answering it for correctness. Don't try to be the one that answers, the fastest. So here we go. Share my screen here. Go to Kahoot.it. And again, we're reviewing these principles. Got to know them. And you can log in with at a minimum, with your initials. You don't have to put your whole name unless you just want to.
If we say circuit principal malfunction here.
I'm sorry. I was just muting.
Oh,
That's okay. I'm going back. I'm sorry. Yeah. There we go. Get this little bar out the way. Okay. So and I said it's gonna be quiet here. What is right to self-determination? Which ethical principle is that?
It sounds like autonomy,
The
so it's just
autonomy.
a
Okay.
self.
Autonomy.
Got it. What about providing fair and equal treatment to all?
Justice.
So you can, the thing, if you forgot what this was, go through each answer choice and say, well, I know it's not this because this is this. Do that process of elimination to see if it'll help. And tomato, this doesn't change that the healthcare provider saying, I know what's best for you, is limiting their autonomy. It's the opposite of autonomy. What the client has said they don't want to go along with that. So make that connection, reword it, think it through. Okay. Okay. So good. You all didn't get tripped up on it. So you know what negligence is. One word will change this. So what word would make this true about negligence? What word do we need to add?
Improper.
Yeah.
improper care.
You're not
or
taking.
or not. NOT. Negligence is not taking proper care. So when you see questions or answer choices that have but, except, all those little small words, it can change that whole definition. But you already through it, didn't get tripped up on it. But if this would have said negligence is not taking care, then that will be a true statement about negligence. But this right here said negligent is. So again, test taking tip. Read the answer choice all the way out. Look for those one word that might change, that will change the definition or what's being talked about. Good. So you had to know what negligence was in order to identify that that was a false statement. Okay. Okay, the person can't pay. The person is non-compliant. The person has a history of diabetes, alcoholism. The list can go on and on and on. But nevertheless, we still provide that same treatment. They're underinsured, overinsured, no insurance. We still provide that same fair treatment. Beneficence. Okay. Two more. Okay. That should be it. Oh no, it's one more. All right, so let's take our first break and we'll see you in 5. Let's go back to our content. So let's go over the information first. Let's make sure we go over all of that. Then we'll come back to some other cahoots. So let's see. Just like we did for beneficent paternalism and autonomy, they kind of go, they're like the opposite. So you can, for non-malfeasance, not causing the patient any harm, It is like the opposite or opposite of malpractice. So what I'm doing, is this what is going to, what am I doing? The interventions that I'm doing, is it not going to cause this patient any harm? Which is like the opposite of malpractice. The things that I do cause the patient harm. So just try to find, paraphrase it, put it into your own words. Don't change the definition of it, but what things do I do that's going to lessen or not cause this patient that's in my care, any harm? And then, so therefore, if that helps guide you too, once you're in practice, okay, do I need to do this or do I not? Because if this is going to cause them harm, then this is going to lead to malpractice. It's going to lead to me not fulfilling my duty. I don't need to do that. Okay. So just kind of talk it through and go back. I know we have, the information is provided for you there, but go back and rewrite it, paraphrase it. That's why I mentioned earlier about you all looking at each other's, discussion questions. Make not only that it's your, part of your grade, but looking at what others are writing, it helps you to think of it in a different way and hopefully you gain a better understanding. Let's move this little bar out the way. Okay. All right. So personal versus professional ethics. Our personal ethics, it's our little guideline too that says, hey, this is the right thing to do, or this is the wrong thing to do. And sometimes there are instances where your personal collides or bump heads with the professional ethics. That Nurse State Practice Act. It says, hey, yes, we can perform these interventions. But personally, you may like, I don't want to take part in that. For example that I gave you all was when you're doing your clinical rotations, make sure that you are observing and looking at everything. When you go out and do your interviews, make sure that you're looking at those job responsibilities, those tasks, all those things that you're going to be expected to do in that facility. So, so that you can make an informed decision about, well, hey, is this a place that I want to work or not? Because if the Nurse State Practice Act says that we can lawfully perform those interventions, and then it's something that you personally want no part of, then that might not be the best setting for you, and or you can have a conversation about maybe an alternate, task in the event that that's something that personally that you don't want to take participate in. Not really sure, but it's a conversation, something you be thinking through. So ethical responsibilities of the nurse. We're that advocate. We're that go-between. We're that phone call away from that something going on with that patient to that healthcare provider. Especially if you are in like the hospital setting, the nursing homes, the long-term care facilities. We're there. The doctors, they come in and make their rounds, but we're there majority of the time with those patients. So we're their advocate. If they have questions, they're having a procedure done or they're having a treatment and they have questions that are unanswered, we're their advocate to say, hey, they want more information or they want you to go over that again with them. Family members, well, let's set up a conference so that that information can be provided to you. So if you see a colleague or witness someone, colleague, unlicensed personnel, another nurse, we have to report that. We have to report it. Just know that you'll have to do a written statement. And then depends on what it is, you may have to give testimony. But nevertheless, it's our ethical obligation. So these are just the principles again, just looking at them in a different way. Non-malfeasance, doing no harm. Beneficent, is this going to benefit? Are we doing good? Autonomy, free to choose. Self-government, all of those are still the same. We're still saying the same, just using different words or phrases. Fidelity, be true. Don't forget about HIPAA. Make sure that we're not violating HIPAA. Injustice, fair treatment for everyone. Okay, more on autonomy. Thinking through all the facts, deciding on the basis of the independent thinking process, self-government, making sure that that client has enough information to make that decision. Even if they refuse, a client, it could be, I know I use leaving against medical advice for the clients. If they believe, that, you know, that they shouldn't be taking pain medication, that they should just push through and endure it, or do have an intervention that's non-pharmacological, and they're refusing their pain medications, then they have the right to refuse. So that is part of that governing in that and autonomy. So your state's Nurse Practice Act. I can't say that enough. Your state Nurse Practice Act. So these are legal aspects of nursing care. So organizational rules and regulations, all these things should come from this Nurse Practice Act. That facilities, policies, and procedures, their rules and regulations, all of these things will go back to this Nurse Practice Act. Because remember, we said the Nurse Practice Act tells us those minimum competencies that we as a nurse can perform lawfully. So from that, facilities derive or come up with their rules and regulations and their policies and procedures. As that Nurse Practice Act changed, so should these rules and regulations and policies and procedures of those organizations. Okay, they dial 1-800-lawyer. What is the lawyer going to refer to determine if the suit or the complaint has any basis? Name 3 things.
Would they refer to their rules and regulations
2 more.
and the policies and procedures
1 more,
and obligations under the law?
which is the Nurse Practice Act. So the Nurse Practice Act, from those facilities, they just don't haphazardly come up with these policies and procedures. It comes from that Nurse Practice Act. Their policies, procedures, and their rules and regulations in the Nurse Practice Act. That's what that lawyer is going to look at and say, well, hey, this nurse, you might have had bad outcomes, but they did what they were supposed to do, or they did not do what they were supposed to do. Because the Nurse Practice Act says, hey, they should do this. The policies and procedures from that organization says they should do this. They didn't follow those rules and regulations or policies and procedures. And so that's what they're going to look at, those 3 things. Where can the LPN find the minimum competencies required to practice safely? Come off mute and tell me. Where can we find that at?
Nurse Practice Act.
Yep, that's correct. The Nurse Practice Act. That was not a trick question. And you have to follow your state's Nurse Practice Act. If your state, even if you have a compact license, you still follow whatever's in that state. You can't pick up and go from New York City to, I don't know, Florida and say, hey, I got a license in New York. Can I come down here and practice? If it's not part of that compact, you don't have a license, and you don't have a license in that state, license to practice. So no. So the State Board of Nursing functions. So what is this State Board of Nursing? What does it do? They play a lot of different parts. So from even developing programs for impaired nurses. So if there's a person that has an issue with substance abuse, they have these programs to assist. They also carry out those disciplinary actions, for violators of the Nurse State Practice Act, for someone that violates those policies and procedures, in those organizational rules. They set fees. They're the ones that come in and approve the schools of nursing. So they come in, they govern that part. All right, so let's look at these disciplinary actions. 8 categories that can result in disciplinary actions. And so it is sad to say, but sometimes, fraud and deceit, it occurs. You have people are coming to us to provide that best care, to be honest, to follow the rules. And, we're doing admissions. We have the patient's information. It's an honor system. That's not our information. We're not going to take it and go and buy a boat with it or go and start subscribe to a credit card with it. But sometimes that stuff like that happens. And so a patient is combative. The patient keeps ringing the bell. You can't move the patient, to the farthest away from the nurse's station. What can we do? What's wrong with the patient? Why? What's the root cause? What is going on? Are they hurting? Are they having a mental health crisis? Is it a head injury? Does that person need someone to sit one-on-one with them? So these are our interventions that prevent us, or things that we should be thinking about so that we will not, commit a crime for that patient. The patient is hitting at us and we hit back. We can't do that. Alcohol and drug abuse, the nurse board, they have these programs. So if the nurse has a problem, they rather you come to them and say, hey, I have this problem, get you in that program and get you some help, rather than injury being caused to a patient because the nurse was under the influence. Violation of that Nurse Practice Act, doing things that are not lawful for us to do. Okay. The nurse is tired. They've worked two doubles and they come on back. They know they're tired. It's on that nurse to say, hey, I really want to work, but I can't. I'm tired. And so, but once you clock in and take those keys and do that count, you are liable. So be careful with that, because those actions can lead to other things. If you're sick, that you have something that's contagious. You have a doctor's orders that tell you to stay at home, but you go on in anyways. Everybody in your group, all the patients that you took care of that shift, they end up sick. And they go back to, well, who was patient zero? It was the nurse. Did the nurse know that they were sick? Yes, they have documentation that told them to stay at home, but they came on anyways. If I do something wrong, what is next? So need to know the steps here. A complaint is filed to the state board. So they can call in to the state board. Anybody can. That complaint is reviewed. An investigation will take place. They may call for statements. They may even visit the facility. But nevertheless, an investigation is done. And even if there's an in-house complaint, it's the same steps. So that complaint is reviewed. An investigation is done. They may have to gather statements. They may have to go back and look at video recordings. Most facilities now have cameras in them, and they do work. If you look at, and they have to post it and say that they have a camera. So there's a little sticker somewhere that usually tells you that you're being recorded. An investigation is done. Board proceedings. This is where we as a nurse have an opportunity to respond. And then there may be a settlement conference, an administrative hearing, and then there might be a discipline program. Person might have to go under the substance abuse monitoring program, where they have to go in and test every so often, report at a certain time, complete some updated continuing education units or something, some type of disciplinary action. So we do need to know these steps. In the board proceedings is where the nurse has the opportunity to respond. The nurse who the complaint is being filed against. Okay, so the board action, and is this an emergence? So does this nurse need to be removed immediately? Do the nurse need to only work day shift because they have to be directly supervised by a registered nurse? Because sometimes in certain facilities, long-term care is what I'm thinking of right now, where there might not be a registered nurse on staff 24 hours. So, the charge nurse can be the LPN in those long-term care facilities. And so as a disciplinary action, that nurse can't work 3 to 11 or 11 to 7 because the intervention is that person must be supervised while they're at work. Is there some type of remediation? And also we have these two databases, excuse me, where the information is placed. In the event that someone has disciplinary actions, this NPDB, this I would think of as a huge file cabinet. So before these two systems, these reporting systems, a person could have committed a crime or had some type of disciplinary action against them, and they could just go to place to place to place to place to work, and no one knew. But now those things are reportable. Not only are they reportable, they are housed or kept in this National Practitioner Data Bank. And so the nurses system, it verifies that you have a license. And also it lists whether or not you have any disciplinary action. So these are just two databases that are out there. And again, like you all said, just to protect the public, to protect the other nurses, those on the healthcare team. So the NPDB, a data management system to track unfit healthcare practitioners and restrict the ability of incompetent professionals to move from place to place without disclosing what's really going on or what has happened in the past. So they run your name through the database, they do the background check, but they still need to run the nurse's name through this data bank just to see if anything turns up, just so that they would be aware of whether or not that person's on probation or suspension or their license have been taken altogether. That nurses system, that verification system, it does not tell where we live. It does not give our date of birth. It does not tell our FICO score. It doesn't tell our shoe size or our scrub size. It gives, of course, our name, your license number, the date that it expires, because those licenses do expire. So there are some things that we have to do as a nurse to keep them current. If a license expire, usually they expire like at the end of the year, so December 31. So if you have not completed the task to continue your license, and on January 1 you work and your license has expired on December 31st, then you're practicing unlawfully because you don't have that license to practice anymore. So each state will have whatever it is, instructions as what you need to do to keep your license current. So we're looking up nurse Donald Duck. We will see Donald Duck's name. We'll see Donald Duck, the nurse license number, the date that those licenses expire, and if Donald Duck has any disciplinary actions. It does not give, like I said, where you live, your date of birth, and things like that. Okay. So legal liability, criminal, government versus individual. Again, we're providing that best care for our clients, but sometimes, things happen. People make, not so good choices. There's been on the news here recently, someone, they were thinking that one of the healthcare providers had injured the client, had, assaulted them. But things happen. Patients or residents or clients, depending on what setting you're in, they may have money on person. And so, those things, hopefully, people don't do that, but sometimes people will steal. They'll get their identity because they have everything at hand. They have their name, their date of birth, all of those things. So intentional versus unintentional. We need to know these different torts. And it is what it is, intended. This person, whatever happened, was it done intentionally? Now, there could be harm caused to the patient, but we, the nurse, the healthcare provider, did not intend for something bad to happen to that patient. I did not mean to hurt the client, but then they did not use those medication rights before administering that medication. And so the patient was given the wrong medication. So the person, the nurse, the healthcare provider did not intend to cause harm, but the patient did sustain harm by that healthcare provider not following the rules and regulations, the policies and procedures. The intentional is what it is. The person intended They threatened that person. They actually meant to hit that person or assault that person. Okay. Liability is being responsible. Liability in nursing is associated with civil law. It includes contracts, negligence, intentional and unintentional torts. Did we clock in? Did we receive that client assignment? Did we not, did we breach duty? And as a result of it, that injury that patient sustained, was it because we did not follow that care plan? We know that we're supposed to go through our medication administration rights. We know the task of delegation, the things that we need to think about, but we just disregard that, and then harm comes to our patient. Then we are responsible. We're responsible for that harm that patient has received. All right, so negligence, you need to know these 4 parts. Let's talk through them though. So we have an assignment. This patient is assigned to us. So it's our duty to take care of that patient, to provide that best care. Going back to the care plan, the care plan says that this person needs 2 persons assistance for transfers. This person needs 1 person to accompany them as they walk in the hallway. Go ahead. It doesn't matter. I know it says 2 people, but go ahead. You can transfer that person by yourself. And as a result of that, that patient had a skin tear. They fell. They broke their hip. The injuries can be minor, or they can be, really intense. But nevertheless, is there a proximate cause? Because we did not do what we were supposed to do based on the care plan. As a result of us not doing, that patient ended up with some type of damage or injury. That's that proximate cause. So was this patient assigned to us? We didn't do what we were supposed to do. Patient had an injury, some type of damages. And there's a direct connection because we did not do what we were supposed to do with that patient's injuries. This is that proximate cause. So when we encourage camaraderie, working on that healthcare team and asking assisting your team members without being asked, we're talking about things that does not end up with you assuming duty. So what do we mean by helping out without being asked? That means maybe emptying your coworkers' garbage, refreshing their water pitcher, helping them restart their cart with straws or medication cups. But be careful when you're helping your team members. Don't help to where you are assuming duty for a patient that you're not assigned to. Because if something happens, then that duty or that breach of duty becomes yours. Then that equals negligence. You want to follow those care plans. If what the care plan is not working, or there's been a change in that patient status, remember we are collaborating with the RN so that care plan can be revised. Okay. So duty refers to the nurse's responsibility to provide care in an acceptable way. The nurse has a duty based on the education as well as the policies and standards of that place of employment. So we've got the Nurse Practice Act. From that, the facility comes up with their rules and regulations and their policies and procedures. Then we provide that service to that client. So breach of duty, we did not adhere to that standard of care for that client. Okay. Was it not done? That's an omission. Or was it not done correctly? Commission. So when they call an expert nurse to come in to look at everything, they're going to go back to that standards of care. Was this what a reasonable person, was this what was expected? What should have been done? Well, this is what should have been done. The nurse did what they were supposed to do. That standard of care was followed, or it was not followed. And then those damages means the client must be able to show that the nurse's negligent act, the things that they did not adhere to or did not do, did actually cause them some harm. Okay. Is there a cause and effect relationship? All right, so in the chat, I need you to paraphrase battery. You are giving us a definition of battery. Just doing one liner. What is battery? What are we talking about? And then also in the chat, just put in that one submission, just put what is the difference? Or tell me what is battery and then what is assault. Put it into your own words. Let me do a little time and give you 2 minutes here. What is battery and what is assault? Two minutes. So if you were trying to explain to us so that we can understand and know the difference between battery and assault. So I'm going to pause here. The timer is going. You have 1 minute, 51 seconds. Okay, we have 44 seconds. Be sure to send your responses out to everyone. And you all look at the responses. Therefore, we're saying the same thing, but it's worded a little different. So hopefully we'll gain a better understanding. All right, we have 19 seconds. Keep placing your responses in the chat if you have not. All right. Okay. Battery to cause physical harm to someone. And then assault is that unjustified attempt or threat. It includes a threat too to touch someone. Okay. Okay, let me hear from you again in the chat. What is a chemical restraint and what is a physical restraint? Need to know the difference. I'm gonna set my timer again. So you can give an example of what a chemical restraint is and what a physical restraint is also. 2 minutes. Let me start my timer here. Okay, we have 1 minute, 5 seconds left. So again, we're talking about chemical and physical restraint. You can also give a definition or you can actually give an example. Chemical versus physical restraint. Let me see what you placed in the chat here. Leg restraints, chemical restraint, use of medication to restrict the person. Physical restraints is using devices to restrict movement. Okay. All right. Need to know. Okay. Medications. You know that person's taking pain medication. They have not asked for pain medication, but that patient keeps ringing the bell, wanting somebody to come, I don't know, close the blinds. So we administer that pain medication, even though that person has not asked for it, because we know it's going to put them to sleep. That's a chemical restraint. Okay. Even if a person is on a pain medication and they are asking for it, but then we know that it's changing their status altogether. They can't even function. They can't feed themselves. And we know that, and we don't call and question those doctors' orders, then it's still a chemical restraint. Okay. What are some examples of physical restraint? Wrist restraints. They're even saying bed rails is an example of a physical restraint as well. If that
Seat belt.
patient, bed rails.
No, I was saying a physical restraint, a seat belt could be considered physical restraint.
Though exactly. And what are those tables? Those tables that are in patients' room, if they can't freely move those tables, even if it's a chair, what are those chairs called? Oh, those reclining chairs. If they can't change that position of that chair by themselves without any assistance, it's considered a physical restraint, even though it's a nice cushy chair. But we have them recline, so if they can't get up and that patient can't adjust that chair themselves, it's considered a restraint. Putting that overbed table in front of them and they can't move it. There was a chair, what was that chair called? I haven't seen one in years, but it pushed you in mind of the chairs that the babies walk around when they're learning to walk. You know, they're sitting, they can walk or they can sit and stay still, and they have a little tray there. They had a device that was made like that for adults. Those are they're considered restraints because those people couldn't get out of those. If you cannot freely um, release or reposition those things are considered physical restraints. Even the side rails, if they're not using those side rails to turn and reposition themselves, because they can't let those rails down. But if they can use those rails to, change the position themselves, if they're using it for that reason, then it's not considered physical restraint. But otherwise, it is. If we have all those bed rails up and they can't get out of that bed, it's considered a physical restraint. Okay. All right. So defamation, damages to one's character. There's something done, either spoken, it's written down, we see it written somewhere, or we hear it because someone gave voice to it. That's defamation of someone's character. So to be specific, slander is spoken, and then libel is it if it is it written down. So what are some examples of that? Someone sends a letter to the newspaper. They do an announcement on the radio, social media announcement. That's defamation to one's character. That's damage to one's character. Okay. So the steps in bringing legal action. Let's go through these bullet points. The client believes that the nurse has violated his or her legal rights. They seek out an attorney. They find an attorney. The attorney has a nurse expert to look at the client's chart. They look at everything. What was done? They look at the standards of care. They look at that Nurse Practice Act, facilities policies and rules and regulations. And they say, hey, this nurse did not do, or this nurse did what they were supposed to do. That nurse expert reviews that information, that client's chart, and they determine whether or not the standard of care has been violated. Did the nurse do what they were supposed to do, or they did not? If they say they violated and did not do what they were supposed to do, then the attorney will go ahead and file that lawsuit. But if they look at that information, the chart, the rules and regulations, the policies and procedures, and that Nurse State Practice Act, and say, hey, I know you had bad outcomes, but it looks like they did everything they were supposed to do, then a lawsuit is not filed. But if they find some little breach or something in there that says that we violated, then a lawsuit is actually filed. The client, which is the plaintiff, files a complaint that documents whatever that grievance, whatever they're saying, the rule that we did not follow. They put that in there. The nurse is then served. And then we respond in writing, saying our side of the story. So you do always want to take the time to document things, because usually these lawsuits, they don't come up right then. It's a year or two later, because we have that statute of limitations years later. And then what are you going to have to fall back on? Your documentation. So make sure, even those electronic health records, a lot of that stuff is pre-populated for you. You just need to go in and click it. Make sure you're taking the time to go in and click it. Even if you have to stay over a few minutes just to get your documentation done, make sure that you're taking time to document those things, because they're going to go back through that chart, the documentation. The plaintiff files a complaint that documents the grievance, the violation of the rules, what they think actually happened or should have happened. Then the nurse responds in writing. Then there's a discovery period. That's pre-trial activity. It begins. So statements are taken from the defendant nurse, the nurse expert, the client, which is the plaintiff, and whomever else is involved. Policies and procedures of the healthcare facility, they're looked at. During that trial, important information is presented to the judge or the jury. Then a decision is made, a verdict is made. Okay? The plaintiff, the client, has the burden of proof, evidence of wrongdoing. They have to show proof where something was done wrong. And they're going to point it out by looking at that Nurse Practice Act, those facility policies and procedures, rules and regulations, and what was documented in that client's chart. Okay? The award in a malpractice case is to make the aggrieved person whole. Even though there's a monetary settlement, you can never, money can never take the place of, but that's just how they had it set up. There's a monetary settlement. An appeal request for another trial can be made if either the plaintiff or the defendant does not consider the verdict or the decision that was made is acceptable. So that's where that appeal comes in at. Okay. So we do want to include our patients in their care. It's their care. It's them that's receiving the care. It's them that have the beliefs, the cultural background, the right to refuse, all of those things. So why not get them involved in their care? Find out what they know about whatever the disease process, because it could be that they just don't have an understanding. It could be that it's against their belief. They may not believe the intervention or the thing that we're saying that's beneficial to them. They may not believe that it's beneficial to them. And so we'll talk about those theories here, I think, next week. And there's a theory called health belief theory. But we do want to find out what they know about their care. So the American Heart Association developed a Patient's Bill of Rights, and they were revised and renamed to say the Patient Care Partnership, because it's a partnership. So this is an ethical rather than legal document for hospitals recommending ways to guarantee the client's rights, that we are providing the best care that we can for our patients. Okay. So HIPAA, we want to make sure that we're maintaining and protecting those clients' privacy. We're working in the emergency room. The patient has been transferred to ICU med-surg. We're no longer providing direct care to that patient. So we don't need to keep looking in that patient's medical record, because we're no longer providing care for that patient. Be careful when you're documenting or conversations that you're having. You're in the elevator. You're walking down the stairwell. You're walking to the break room, walking down the hallway, and you're, stating things. So just be careful that we are not violating. We always want to protect the client's privacy. You know, if you're writing on, a Cardex or you have a little clipboard or something, making sure that it's not left in a place where confidential information is going to be displayed or shown. They have shred bins. Make sure that we are actually placing those documents and things in those bins, those receptacles that so that information can be shredded. Don't throw that information in the garbage can. Do not do it. Even those medication cards, it has the patient's name on it. It has a lot of information on there. Making sure we're using or following whatever that facility's policy is in disposal of those medication cards. A lot of times they have what they call those blackout markers. It's not a regular Sharpie, because a regular Sharpie doesn't actually mark it out. So you can't see it. They have a special type marker. And a lot of facilities allow you to place those cards in that shred bin. So those things are shredded so that that client's privacy is protected. So, and a lot of facilities have a designated privacy officer. You might be asked to be the privacy officer. And what happens with that is you'll go over, those that information, those policies and procedures with the clients. You will also update it or do in services. But in the event that someone has violated HIPAA and someone's privacy has not been protected, you will also have to investigate and then see that process through to the end. So keeping clients' information private. Okay, what information can we give out? The clients, they have a right to get a copy of their medical records and to look at their records upon request. Of some facilities, depends on how many pages, if they want an actual printout, some will actually charge a fee, but they have the right to have their medical record. So we want to adhere to the minimum necessary rule to protect the client's privacy. So how do we do that? We need to consider, in the event that the example here that they are given is patients going home. They are supposed to get a hospital bed. They're supposed to get a concentrator, cane, walker, crutch, some device. And there's a vendor that's going to deliver this equipment to the patient. Remember the minimum necessary rule, because we want to protect the client's privacy. So ask, what information does this vendor need to provide this equipment to this patient? Do they need to know who is going to? Yes. Do they need to know where they're going to actually take it to? So they do need to know their address. And then how are that vendor's going to get paid? Do they need to know diagnosis, how long they've had the disease process? No, they don't need to know any of those things. But they do, at a minimum, they need to know the client's name, their address, the payer information. This is who is paying. It could be the insurance company's information. It could be that person's writing a check. But beyond those things, the vendor does not need to know their their date of birth and their social security number. They don't need that information. The minimum necessary rule. I'm going to pause here to see if we have any questions in the chat. If you have any questions, or you can come off mute and say if you have any questions. If we said anything that you don't understand. So that minimum necessary rule. What information is it okay for me to give out? So just think about it. Do they need to know this information to do whatever it is to provide this service that they're going to provide? If not, don't give it out, because otherwise we're going to be violating HIPAA. Okay. Client's right to consent. The client has the right to consent to or to refuse treatment. Remember, we talked about autonomy. They have the right to self-government. So they can refuse a treatment or they can accept it. Okay. So we do need to know all of these different parts of informed consent. What is informed consent? So the person, the patient, they know that they're going to have they know that they have whatever diagnosis or the suspected diagnosis. Okay. They've been told, well, hey, this treatment is recommended, this surgery, this medication. What is the reason for this? Then they also need to be told that there are going to be some possible side effects or complications. What is the benefit of me doing this treatment or taking this medication? All of that needs to be explained, the benefits, the side effects, the complications. And then also, what else? Is there an alternative treatment? Okay, I hear you saying this is what I need to do. You told me about what to expect, the benefits of it. But hey, is there something else that I can do? Is there an alternative treatment that I can do or have that will, do me just as good? We have to tell them about that. This is all part of informed consent. Okay. Who? Who are the people that's going to be performing the procedure? Who's putting me to sleep? Who's the anesthesiologist? Who's the healthcare provider? And then prognosis. If treatment is not done, because we do want to support autonomy, do we know the outcome? If we don't know it, we say we don't know it. The healthcare provider will say, hey, 75%, they'll give the statistics based on the data. And then we want to answer questions. The client, they went over all of this. The client said, hey, I just need somebody to come just tell me that one more time. I understand it, but I just need that to go be reviewed one more time. Or if that client has a specific question, hey, I know that you said a person's gonna put me to sleep. Now, what is that person called? And it might be just what they just need to know. Well, that person's also called an anesthesiologist, or that person, or they may say, or we may use a term that they might not understand. They may say, well, hey, I have a question about. We have to inform them or clarify. And then explanation that the client has the right to change their mind and say, nope, I signed the dotted line, but I've changed my mind. It's okay. They can change their mind at any time. All of this is informed consent. You need to know all these components of informed consent. Okay. So once we know the components of informed consent, also be able to apply it. So if there's a scenario and one of these components are missing, so how are we going to know it's missing? Because we know what informed consent is. So just look at it both ways. Okay. So now we're talking about legal documents, advance directive or living will. These are legal documents, you all. We have to follow them. And if a patient has a document that says, I don't want this treatment or I do want this treatment, we have to follow those legal documents. Okay. So a living will does not specify a person to make healthcare decisions. A living will is a document that has everything written out. So, question. The patient in 201s has a living will that states that their second cousin, Mary, will make the healthcare decisions for them. Is that a living will that person has or not? What was that again?
No.
No, because a living will does not specify a person. So we're going to take what we know and apply it to the situation or the scenario. We know a living will is a legal document. It tells us what the person wants and won't, but it does not specify a person. Does not. So if the example gives us a person, then that's not a living will. Okay. So a durable medical power of attorney is another legal document. It's valid in all states. Okay. It names a person. This healthcare proxy is a person that's at least 18 years or older. So the living will does not name a person, but the durable medical power of attorney, it does name someone to make those decisions in the event that person cannot speak for themselves. And it is valid in every state. So that document, they don't have to get a new durable medical power of attorney for each state that they go to and live in. That form is valid in each state. Okay. And it does name a person to make those decisions. A living will does not specify a person. Okay. Do not resuscitate order. Advance directive based on the Patient Self-Determination Act that gives a physician legal permission to write an order that say the person's wishes are they do not want to be resuscitated. And if they have that order, they have that legal document, and we go in and provide resuscitation, we have went against a legal document. Okay. The physician must pronounce the client dead and document this status before we turn off the ventilator. You know, we can't just say, well, this patient is actively dying. You know, we don't know exactly when they're going to pass away, but it's soon. Well, let me just go ahead and just turn this ventilator off. No, we cannot do that. The client must be pronounced deceased, or they must be in order. We can't just turn it off because we know that death is imminent or, you know, pretty close by. Failure to wait for this determination and documentation can be considered an act of murder, and it's both illegal and unethical. You're not just going to go and turn off the ventilator. No, we're not going to do that. Nope, nope, nope. What are some unethical acts? Okay. You know, the person, we're tired of them bringing the call, like, or if the patient's pain isn't controlled and we think that they just need an extra dose. So we double up, but we don't have an order. So that's unethical. So we contact that healthcare provider, provide that information, and hopefully they will prescribe something different. They may get something for breakthrough pain. Accepting that's unethical. Administering CPR to a client that has a do not resuscitate order. I just know if we just do this CPR, we can bring them back. But they have an order that's legal that says do not resuscitate. So we cannot administer CPR. Okay. There are different leadership styles. One is midway, it's balance. You know, it considers the equal balance between the task and the employees. The autocratic, it's just more focused on the task. We just got to get this done. We're not focusing on or caring about how it's affecting the employee. And then the lazy fair, it kind of give you the kind of give it away because it's just focused on the employee. Never mind the task that we're supposed to be performing. Oh, well, we'll just let you all just do what you want to do. It'll get done something one way or the other. That's lazy fair. Okay. So delegation versus assignment. Delegation versus assignments. So assignment is the distribution of work that each staff member is responsible for during that work period. What is your assignment for today? And they align with your job description or position. Okay. But the delegation is the transfer of responsibility of whatever that task is from one person to the other. So the nurse can delegate a task that's in that person's scope to be completed. We can delegate to the unlicensed personnel, measuring blood pressures, measuring height, but we do not delegate to unlicensed personnel the task of administering medication. That is not in their scope of practice. It is not on their job description. Once that unlicensed personnel accept that task is delegated, they cannot transfer it. Well, hey, let me go ask, my coworker to do it. They've accepted that responsibility. It cannot be transferred. And even though we delegated as the nurse that task, we still are ultimately responsible. So, but before we delegate, what's that one thing that we need to go and check or make sure of before we delegate a task, even if it's a task that the unlicensed personnel can complete? For example, measure vital signs. What do we need to do before we delegate a task to anyone?
Make sure the patient is stable.
Got it. We want to assess that client's condition. Are they stable? Even if they are unstable, and it's a task that the unlicensed personnel can complete, we will not delegate that task to a client, to a coworker, unlicensed personnel, if that client is unstable. Well, it's just measuring their vital signs. That client is unstable. We will not delegate that task. So before we delegate, the client must be assessed. Data must be gathered to determine their condition, stable versus unstable. The nurse will determine the client's stability prior to delegating a task. The unlicensed personnel or the CNA, they do not delegate. The delegation task cannot be transferred. Okay. But what if they refuse? Once they've accepted the delegation, or if they just outright just refuse, what's our next steps? What do we need to find out?
To see why they refuse.
Exactly. And I thought that was on my next slide, but it's going to come up on the slide. We just need to ask why, what's going on. It could be, we don't never know, but find out why are they refusing. Yeah, that's just a conversation. So we have, just like we have rights of medication administration, we have rights of delegation. We need to ensure first, go in and check the status of that client. Are they stable or unstable? Then, is this task or duty that we're delegating to this person, is it the correct task to delegate? Is this client stable or unstable? Is this the correct person? Make sure that we communicate the correct instructions or directions. Check the blood pressure while they're lying down and while they're sitting, using the left arm. Making sure that we're communicating correctly. And then we have to still supervise and evaluate. So these are some tasks that they're routine tasks that we usually delegate to the unlicensed personnel or the CNA. But we do want to make sure that the client is stable. So we check their stability. Personal care, feeding, hydration, basic restorative skills, including transfers, positioning, measuring, recording vital signs, assisting with elimination, including catheter care, not inserting the catheter, but catheter care, maintaining safety factors, including fall prevention, applying heat and cold, collecting specimens, urine and stool. They're not doing inserting a Foley catheter, but it could be a clean catch or just emptying that GU bag. Okay. Measure and record vital signs, height, weight, intake and output. Assistance with elimination, maintaining safety factors, including fall prevention. Okay, we just said that. So think about the skills lab, all the skills that you have to get checked off on, administer medications, injections, tube feedings, those things that we're not delegating those tasks. Teaching, demonstrating, things like that. We're not delegating any of that. We're not sending a nursing assistant in to teach about whatever it is. Okay. All right. So let's see. Let me hear from you. To delegate or not? Tell me, are we going to delegate this or we will not delegate?
We can delegate to the CNA.
Okay. So just the unlicensed personnel, Mr. Larry, can we delegate for him to measure and record vital signs? Okay. What about assistance with elimination, including catheter care?
Yeah.
No.
Yes. Delegation.
We went in and made sure the client is stable. So yes, remember, go back to make sure that you know these things that are on this right here. Assistance with elimination, including catheter care. Go back through the video. Okay. Maintaining safety factors that include fall prevention. Can they apply heat and cold?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
What about collecting stool specimens or urine samples?
Yes.
Okay. Now we're
Yes.
not talking about sterile procedures now, not sterile techniques. You know, think about administering medications. We had to insert a Foley catheter. That's sterile technique. They're not setting up sterile fields. Nurses and assistants do not have training in sterile techniques. Crisis situations, we must be there. The client's having, develops chest pain. That's an example. Although the nursing assistants can collect simple data, they have not been trained to make decisions or interpret data. So they're going to measure those blood pressures. They're going to write them down for us. But we're not asking them to say, hey, is this high or low? Because remember, we're in a healthcare facility. We're not at home. I'm sure a person does have some knowledge about, what's a normal blood pressure, but we can't ask them to interpret data. Was this enough urine output? So we're not asking them to teach, make decisions, or interpret. For example, nurses assistants cannot evaluate. They can get that that finger stick, or are they can they tell the patient whether or not that glucose is high or low? Can they determine that these vital signs need to be rechecked in an hour or 2 hours based on those results? No. Duties that are not part of their legal scope of practice may never be delegated. Okay.
So the STNA or CNA can take the blood sugar, but cannot give no other information regarding high or low or need insulin or not need insulin.
Exactly. The same thing with measuring that blood pressure. They can measure the blood pressure, but all that other stuff, no. Not in the facility. Now, if we just sitting on the front porch or back porch and just having a conversation, that's different. No one's under our care. This is the slide I thought I had moved around. So what if delegation is refused? We ask, well, what is the reason? It could be that they might not feel comfortable. It might be an issue with that patient that we might not be aware of. It most of the time is not that they're just not wanting to complete their job task. It's something has happened or something's going on. But we ask that question, what's going on? What is the reason that you're not wanting to complete that task? Okay, change of shift report. We're getting ready to go home. And the next nurse is coming. What information are we passing on? So we're giving them the information. We're establishing their baseline. So you're leaving and you're giving me report. So when I go in to assess the client, interact with the client, the information that you're giving me is going to be the baseline. So I'm going to compare my findings with the information that you gave me because that's going to be my baseline. Then I can determine, well, hey, this patient has changed. Nurse Lisa just said in report, this person was alert. They knew where they were. They knew their name. They was orientized for. I go in and they can even tell me where they're at. They don't even know their name. So then I can determine there's a change in this client status. So change the shift report. It establishes that baseline. Establish that baseline. It involves a quick visit of each resident to compare the status with the status reported at the change of shift. So we go in and we compare. We do our assessment. Okay, to see if there's a change of status in that patient. What can we do to increase our employment opportunities? We can obtain certifications. Now, some facilities will have these in-house certifications. Now, you're going to be the person that they're going to go to every time they need whatever it is done because you're certified in it. But in addition to that, a lot of times there will be a difference in your pay because you are certified and they know that they are going to be calling you to do whatever the task is. We're life learners. You want to always be attending seminars, increasing your knowledge base, enroll in a leadership course. A lot of times the nurses, the state's nurse associations, they have like these leadership courses that you can go through. And so this right here makes you more marketable. It increases your employment opportunities. It also affects your pay. It may be most of the time is a difference in pay. And when you can show them that you participated in these things. Okay. Are there any questions about any of the content that we went over? Any questions? Can we put information in the document information in the medical record that is false?
No,
No,
No.
we should not be doing that. And that is considered what?
it's a factual document. It's a legal document.
It's legal. That medical record is legal. So we're placing information in there that is incorrect. That's false. That is considered fraud. Okay. All right. And so an unintentional tort, we uh gave too many of the medication, too many pills. We miscalculated. Either way, we did not give the correct amount of medication. We did not intend to. Is that an intentional tort or unintentional tort?
Unintentional.
Okay. So we do want to follow our medication administration rights. So there's information that defames a person's character, and it is posted on social media. What is that? Is that libel or slander?
Is it libel?
Libel is defamation of character through use of pictures. Slander is defamation through verbalizing information. Okay. So what if we get, the patient got some lab work done and the lab company called or lab called up and say, hey, it's calling this critical lab value on patient in room 201. I just pick on patient 201 all the time. And so we do not report that. We write it down, but that's as far as it goes. Is it something wrong with that situation? Yes, we have committed, we're negligent because we have a critical or abnormal lab value has been reported to us. It is our duty to report that lab value. So that's what I said, make sure that whatever you're doing, if you have assumed duty, that you follow through with it. Because then if something adversely or that person gets injured or something, then you're liable. You are negligent because you didn't do what you were supposed to do as a duty. And we don't really think about lab values, but yeah, if that lab value is abnormal and it's not reported, that healthcare provider that know to provide an action or intervention for it, then we're negligent. Okay. So you as that privacy officer, know that you might have to go over instructions. They'll contact you. A lot of times, sometimes people will think, well, hey, my privacy wasn't being protected, and you're going to be their starting point. You will have to go in and just go over their privacy policy. If an attorney is trying to determine if um, this claim is relevant or not to move on with the case, who will they bring in, and what would that person review? They're bringing a nurse expert, and then that nurse expert will look at what? Your documentation, the client's chart, to determine if we deviated from that standard of care. So I'm saying all the stuff that we just said, I'm just saying it in a different way, just so that, because we all learn differently. It sticks with us in different ways that things are worded. So this is not new information. I'm just rewording everything that was just on those slides in a different way. All right. Are there any questions about anything that I've just said? All right. And so we did not take our last two breaks, you all. So we're actually overtime. So I'm going to stop right here and let you all log off. It's just as soon as I finish with this video, I'll download it and upload it. At a minimum, make sure that you're going back to the classroom recordings. If you are if you are a repeater, previously dropped a course, come back to the course. You're supposed to meet weekly with your professors. Please do so. And that meeting can take the place of an email, phone call, Zoom. Make sure that you are attending the live exam reviews. At a minimum, go back through them. Have a good night. We'll see you next week. Have your IDs ready. Something else I was going to tell you all. I think that was it. That was it. Justice refers to providing that fair and equal treatment for all clients. If we overhear someone saying that they will not provide the best care, the same care for a client because of their pay status, because they have diabetes, they're an alcoholic, we must report that. That ethical principle that is being violated is justice, because justice refers to providing fair and equal treatment to all clients. Okay. If a client decides to not take a medication, they decide to refuse a medication, refuse blood or blood products, they are exercising the ethical principle of autonomy. They have a right to refuse. Beneficent paternalism actually goes against, it's like the opposite of autonomy, is where the healthcare provider seeks the courts to intervene for a client's treatment. They provide that information to the courts. So if a client is deciding to exercise autonomy and leave against medical advice, we can't keep them. If we're preventing them from leaving, then that is considered false imprisonment. We cannot prevent them physically or any other way from leaving. We have to allow that client to leave. Otherwise, it's called false imprisonment. We want to advocate for our clients and protect and uphold the rights of each client. We are being that client's advocate, where we are protecting and speaking up for them. So HIPAA privacy rule. We can share information with other healthcare professionals that are actually involved in the client's care, but not with someone that is not involved. We do want to keep medical records locked and secure. You want to make sure that those computer laptops are closed, making sure that that medical record is locked and secure. Providing health information to the client's family only after getting that patient's permission or consent. You just can't give that out. When you're going in to provide care for your patients and they have visitors, family members, we ask them to step out. We have to have permission to provide information to their families. We got to have consent. And then we have to report. We're mandated reporters if we are suspecting abuse. We're considered mandated reporters. If a facility is providing or providing a service that personally you deem that it is incorrect or wrong to do, then that's an instance where personal ethics might conflict with professional ethics. It is lawful for you to do whatever the procedure is, but personally, you might say, hey, this is not something that I need to participate in. We do want to have a non-judgmental attitude when we are providing care for our patients. Sometimes we provide home health. We go into the client's home. As long as that environment is safe, we move on and provide that care. If they have clothes piled up, they have dishes that are not washed in the sink, that's not harmful to us. So we have a non-judgmental attitude, and we go on and provide that best care for our clients. Beneficent paternalism is used for extreme circumstances. It is outright telling the client, the family member, the person that's making the decision, whether or not it's the client or their family member, their parent or guardian, what the best option is. That healthcare provider is actually choosing what they think is the best option. Beneficent paternalism is a disrespectful attitude toward the client and what the client wants treatment option. Beneficent paternalism is telling the client what treatment option they should choose. It's usually used in implemented in extreme emergent situations. That information is presented to the courts. It does not mean that the courts will go with the healthcare provider's decision, but it's just an opportunity for them to present that information. So for online verification, we're verifying whether or not the nurse has a license. So that will have their name, the nurse's name, their license number, the date that the license expired, and also if there is any history of any disciplinary actions. Okay. The patient care partnership, we collaborate, the healthcare team collaborates with the patient. Client's getting ready to go home. What type of assistance is needed? What is expected? The patient care partnership and clients encourages the patient, the client, to participate in that in their care. So it's a collaboration with the healthcare team to ensure that the client has the resources and things that they need. Okay. So in order to not violate HIPAA, remember, we're not throwing notes and papers and sticky notes in the garbage can. We're placing that information in that designated protected receptacle. The main focus of HIPAA is to protect the client's privacy. So we want to make sure that records, our computers are locked. We can't see those screens as people are passing by. Be sure that we're not discussing information on the elevator in the hallway. And we do want to throw notes or any papers, anything, medication cards, anything that has client information on it in that appropriate receptacle. But we just don't throw those things in the garbage can. Okay. We do know that we talked about informed consent. It includes the name and qualifications of the people who will perform the procedure. If a client is still asking, well, I wonder who's going to do the procedure, then informed consent has not been obtained because all of those questions must be answered. Okay. Informed consent does include explaining the possible side effects and complications, description of the treatment, the name and credentials of who is actually doing the treatment, performing that procedure, and the explanation that the client had to pay. You got to tell the patient, you're signing here and you want to change your mind or revoke this written permission, you can at any time. That client has to be explained that. If the client has to be told who is going to be assisting their doctor. They need to know who will be performing the procedure. Okay. So standards of care, we're looking at the facility's policies, their rules and regulations, and that nurse practice, that all those things should go hand in hand. So that facility is creating their policies and procedures and their rules and regulations from the Nurse Practice Act anyway. So we need to have those three components. The State Board of Nursing, remember, it approves the schools of nursing. Schools, colleges, universities, they just can't just say, hey, I want a nursing school, and they just create one. It has to be approved through that Board of Nursing. We are mandated reporters. If we suspect abuse, we don't have to have all the details. As a nurse, we are legally bound. We are mandated reporters. We must report that information. Going back to that healthcare facilities, policies and procedures, those are used in the court of law. If there's a lawsuit that's being brought against, that's what they'll go back and look at. The State Nurse Practice Act, it tells us those minimum competencies that we can function or do as a LPN. It tells us about our CEUs, those continuing education units for requirements. And it gives us an explanation of any unprofessional conduct. Okay, we're trying to verify whether or not your nursing license are valid. It tells us your name, your license number, the expiration date, and then if there are any disciplinary actions. Okay. Remember, for disciplinary actions, the board proceedings, this is where the nurse would have the opportunity to respond to any of those allegations or that complaint. That National Practitioner Data Bank, remember that's that huge file cabinet that keeps information about whose license has been suspended or are there any disciplinary actions for that nurse. So that person can't jump around, go from state to state and place to place without anyone knowing that they have some type of, have their license have been suspended or have some type of disciplinary action. That data bank keeps that information. So those facilities look up that person's name and they look to see if that person has been suspended or their license have been revoked or taken. Okay. There's a third investigation that is done when a complaint is issued. Okay. You have to do that investigation. Just because a complaint is issued does not mean that that complaint is valid in real. It has to be investigated. We talked about the different restraints, the chemical restraints and the physical restraints. If we we administer medication and it's not warranted, then that's called a chemical restraint. And that's considered a civil action. If we're administering medication and it's just not warranted, we're administering pain medication. We know pain medication usually makes people sleepy. And so we're giving that pain medication so that person will go to sleep. That is a civil action. That's a chemical restraint that we have administered that medication for. Okay. So another civil action, if there has been a medication error, that's a civil action. So we want to make sure that we're following those patient administration rights, taking the time to make sure that those things are being followed. Remember, falsifying information, a client's record, we don't do that. If it didn't happen, we don't write it. That is fraud. If we don't intend to cause harm, but harm comes to a patient because we did not administer the medication correctly, that is an unintentional tort. Okay, unintentional. Reliable is defamation through written. So it could be pictures, article, a newspaper article. It can be a statement that's posted on social media, but it's written. Slander is spoken. It is what the person says. If they say something out loud that defames or damages that person's character.